Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. I will call the August 2nd Select Board meeting to order at 5:30. I do have a couple of minor changes to the agenda. One is under announcements for the committee vacancies. If anyone is here tonight who wishes to speak, who can't be here on the 16th, please feel free to come up. And then the other change is there are two items under consent that should have actually been under citizen departmental requests. So we're just going to move those down. It's the Cisco Brewers request for extension of hours and the noise bylaw waiver. Number 2 and 3 under consent will be number 1 and 2 under citizen departmental requests. And with that, we'll accept the agenda unless anyone has an objection and move on to announcements.
Okay. Thank you. First off, I want to introduce our new DPW director, Drew Patnode, right here. Welcome, Drew. Drew is well known already to many town staff. He's worked for Weston and Sampson as a project engineer, and we are acquainted with him. We're very happy to have him on board and work with him. So thanks, Drew, for showing up tonight. A couple other things. There is, I have a couple of new announcements that came in late, but before that, the items on the agenda are, I think Erica is going to read for us the names of applicants received for round 2 of committee vacancies.
Okay, so for Agricultural Commission, 1 seat available, 1 applicant, Kelly Steffen. Cemetery Commission, 1 seat available, 1 applicant, Alan Reinhardt. Council for Human Services, 3 seats available and 3 applicants, Claudia Valley, Sarah Wright, and Kelly Steffen. Council on Aging, 1 seat available and 0 applicants. Cultural Council, 2 seats available and 0 applicants. Finance Committee, 1 seat available and 1 applicant, Joseph Wright. Harbor and Shellfish Advisory Board, 1 seat available and 1 applicant, James Sherlin. Planning Board alternate, 1 seat available, 3 applicants, John Kitchener, Cameron Murphy, and Kelly Steffen. The Real Estate Assessment Committee, 2 seats available, 1 applicant, Nathaniel Lowell. Town Council Study Committee, number of seats and terms to be determined. Applicants currently are Peter Schaefer, Michael Alvarez, Jericho Mealy, Bo Barber, Curtis Barnes, Donna Martino, Jill Veith, Jeff Carlson, John Riccio, Hillary Hedges Rayport, Kelly Steffen, Joe Grouse, who applied late, and Caroline Baltzer, who applied late. The board is going to have to make a determination whether or not they want to consider those 2 applications. And then the Tree Advisory Committee, 3 seats available and 2 applicants, Whit Bourne and Mary Longacre. I have already, for some of these committees that have no applicants, I've reached out to the people who've indicated that they're interested on the talent bank. And I've got a couple of applications in, so they'll be part of our round 3. And that's it.
Thank you, Erica. There is no board meeting next Wednesday, August 9th, due to the summer schedule. And the next board meeting will be Wednesday, August 16th, regular Wednesday meeting, that is. We have a couple of additional announcements. They came in next Thursday, August 10th at 12:30. There will be a public tour of the town's first solar project. It's at the Surfside Wastewater Treatment Facility at 81 South Shore Road. I think Erica is going to put some links up to where more information could be located about that project. We also are encouraging the public to participate in the development of a draft long-range transportation plan, and there's another link for that. We'd like the public to participate in a review phase and also comment on the draft document as it is currently posted on the website. We also encourage public participation, which is critical to ensure community concerns are addressed in a current update that is being undertaken to the Nantucket and Mattocket Harbors Action Plan. There is a survey we are hoping people will take, and that is also online, and there's a link right there. And that's it for announcements.
Okay, if anyone wanted to introduce themselves that can't be here on the 16th, or if it's more convenient while you're here tonight, feel free to come to the mic.
Hi, I'm Jill VIII. I'm a Surfside resident, and I just wanted to make myself available to answer any questions. I applied for the Town Council Study Committee. No. I don't want to.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Thank you. I think I said I needed in my application, but thank you.
Okay, if anyone else, or we'll be doing this in 2 weeks. I'm having trouble getting on to the Zoom link. So, if you just want to tell me when if people have their hands up.
Can anybody hear me right now from RW Bryant Contracting Inc.?
Yeah, Ben, we can hear you, and we're going to get to your item shortly.
Thank you.
Okay, just keep an eye. I don't know why my connection's not working. Okay, there's nobody in there yet. Okay. I don't believe there's any additional follow-up on prior select board meetings. I know some people have been emailed back answers to their questions. Is there any public comment tonight for items that are otherwise not on our agenda for discussion? Please come to the mic and introduce yourself. We do have a three-minute time limit, just so you're aware.
Okay, I don't think it'll take that long. My name is Andrew Saul, and I'm a resident of 39 Baxter Road in Sconset. I've owned my home for approximately 15 years, and I wanted to make the board aware of a problem that has occurred. We're just getting overwhelmed now on the Bluff Walk. Ever since COVID, the foot traffic on the walk has just gone bananas. I believe it really started at the advent of COVID. And I think there's two reasons for this in just observing it. And it's not a scientific observation, but we now have a tremendous amount of social media posting. We have advertising going on. And what's happened is we have tenfold times the amount of foot traffic. If you go into my backyard, you would see people with yoga mats, and I'm not exaggerating, bicycles, dogs, and as the buses come in to Sconset, the people come off and they just inundate our backyard. I think it's really, at this point, it really a security concern, because you could have 500 people, with no exaggeration, walking through our backyard. And it's a small backyard. So we're really losing the quiet enjoyment of our home. And I just feel that something has to be done. I think there's two major problems. One is the advertising in the social media, to making all these people aware of the bluff. And the second problem is there is an abuse of what the walk, I think, was intended for. It was originally intended, if you go back to 1890, as a footpath, and now it's become really a Coney Island venture. And people have dogs going through there, bikes going through there. It's just an abuse, I think, of what the intent of the path was in the beginning. And I just wanted the board to be aware of this. Whatever you can do to help, if there's any observation, whatever, the Civic Association, Sconset Civic Association, is aware of it. I went to the meeting 2 weeks ago. I spoke as I'm speaking now, and I couldn't believe it. I had a standing ovation of 100 people. So it's really a problem, and it's not only myself, it's really the whole neighborhood. And I hope you guys can do something to help us down here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for bringing it to our attention. Go ahead. Just please introduce yourself.
My name is Steve Cole, and I am a resident of 3 Baxter Road, which some of you may be familiar with it. It's Kermit Roosevelt's previous house. It's actually below the bluff walk. And we have a gate. And, you know, that this year, we've actually had people opening the gate and walking down to our front door. We've had dogs off leash running around our property. It seems like in the last year or so, the number of people who have violated our property and have left the bluff walk to enter our property has really significantly increased. And again, I support everything Mr. Saul said. The advertising, you can see the buses come in and people get off the buses at the circle in town and walk directly to the bluff walk. It's a nonstop parade these days. And thank you very much for listening to what I had to say.
Thank you. We don't generally respond with follow up. Oh, Meredith? Go ahead.
Hi, yes, I just thank you for my reply. I got a reply this morning, and I just sort of had a further question because I think that maybe we aren't planning for the worst case scenario if we're relying on the Coast Guard, who is really not supposed to respond unless it's 3 miles or further out. And we're asking the harbor master under the police to respond to emergencies. I mean, I just think that as a healthcare provider, I think that we can do better. And, you know, there's a lot of towns that have fireboats and can afford them and probably don't have as big of a budget as us. Rutland, Mass isn't even on the water and they have a fireboat and we are surrounded by water, yet our fire department still doesn't have a boat. So I'm just wondering, I know our chief, our current chief came from Aquidneck Island. And so I'm wondering if they had a protocol for when the fire department would respond to fires on boats. I just think we have a boat in the harbor that's over 100 feet long, probably more than one. And if that caught fire, that would be a huge mess. And we're saying that the harbor master is going to respond with a fire extinguisher. And I think that probably would not go very well for anyone. So I don't know if our chief can share at some point what their previous protocol is and maybe what we could try and adapt.
Okay, thank you for your question. We will follow up on that. Is there anyone else for public comment this evening? Okay, I do have the link up now. There's no new business that I'm aware of. We have approval of some minutes, payroll warrants, treasury warrants, and pending contracts. Are there any questions or comments on any of the contracts?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to recuse myself as I am an employee of the Nantucket Interfaith Council.
Okay, why don't we do a motion for 1, 2, and 3 first?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously. And then on the pending contracts, do you want to you'll just recuse from the whole thing? Does someone want to make a motion on the rest?
Move approval.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, that's 4-0. Consent, we have some gift acceptances for our Natural Resources, Human Services, Salt Marsh Senior Center, and the Fire Department. Brooke, do you want to read those?
So the Natural Resources Department has received a gift of $9,426 from the Sandbar to help improve surface water quality on Nantucket. The Human Services Department has received a gift of $300 from Maria Wayne for Salt Marsh Senior Center. And the Fire Department, for the benefit of firefighters and EMTs, has received food provisions valued between $1,500 and $2,000 from Brit Newhouse. I would move to accept all gifts for their designated purposes with thanks to go to the donors.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, next up, we have Citizen departmental requests, Cisco Brewers and Bartlett Farm request for extension of hours for music and alcoholic beverage service on August 22, 2023, rain date August 23, 2023. This has been kind of a yearly request.
Yeah,
but
correct. This
Amy-
is just for those who haven't been through this yearly request, the Cisco license, when they were granted back when, were allowed a limited number of special events outside of their normal business hours, as long as they notify the select board of these special events. And this has been a yearly occurrence since 2015 for Bartletts and their staff. So it's just a small staff party at 7 to 10 p.m. So it's within the noise ordinance and there's no real issue. They've never, ever been a problem. So just need to notify and get approval from the select board for the special event.
Are there any questions? Any motions?
Move
I'm
appro-
recusing myself, Bartletts.
Okay,
Move approval.
Second.
okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That carries unanimously 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have a noise bylaw request for RW Bryant for night work along a portion of Easton Street to install fiber-optic cable. This is a necessity for the Coast Guard. And they've got to get it done ASAP. So does anyone have questions about that? Definitely all of the abutters need to be notified in a timely manner if we're going to approve this, so that they're not blindsided.
And if they need to move the cars, there's gotta be signs and things.
Correct. Yeah. Any other comments, questions, motions?
I'll move approval with the condition that timely abutter notification.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that carries unanimously 5-0.
So Ben,
Thank
you're
you,
all
Jen.
set.
Thank you.
Appreciate all you so much every time.
Get it done fast.
Yes, ma'am.
Town managers report.
Okay, so what I would like to do
Oh, no,
here.
I'm sorry. I skipped Leah.
Oh, sorry, Leah.
I thought you needed to go home. Coastal Resilience Coordinator quarterly report for Coastal Resilience Advisory Committees.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. I'll wait until it comes up. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so highlights from the second quarter. Mary Longacre stepped down after 4 years of being chair. And I have a letter that she has written, so I'm going to read that. She wrote, I am extremely proud of the work the Coastal Resilience Advisory Committee has done since being established in 2019. We started by reviewing the current conditions as reported in the 2020 Risk Assessment and Resilience Strategies report and various government resources, then worked in an unprecedented manner, hand in hand with the Coastal Resilience Coordinator to draft the request for proposals for the Coastal Resilience Plan. We developed a library of resources on the town's website for local reports, state and federal information, and understanding what other communities are doing about coastal resilience. We created a brochure, Improving Coastal Resilience at Home, a Nantucket guide for minimizing water damage to your property for homeowners. Working with a team of consultants led by Arcadis, we developed the Coastal Resilience Plan and accompanying existing conditions and coastal risk assessment report through a process featuring significant public engagement. Several recommendations from the CRP are already completed and more are underway or in development. In 2020, the Select Board adopted our recommendation that all town departments, boards, commissions, and committees, and any service providers, contracted engineers, and consultants need to be aware of and need to use the NOAA high scenario to accommodate current storm surge, as well as sea level rise in their decisions, deliberations, and planning. And we have seen this recommendation implemented through the town departments and incorporated in updated plans. My thanks to the Select Board for their commitment to safeguarding Nantucket's future by establishing the committee into town administration for creating the Coastal Resilience Coordinator position and designating funds for both the Coastal Resilience Plan and implementation of its recommendations. It has been a joy to work with Vince Murphy and with his successor, Leah Hill. My thanks also to the CRAC members, especially those who have served all 4 years with me, for their support, dedication, and contributions. Mary Longanker. All right. And then some other highlights are Peter Brace and myself facilitated the Coastal Resilience Table at the Harbor Plans Forum last month or a couple months ago. And then CRAC also wrote a support letter for the feasibility study and design for flood barrier in Nantucket's historic downtown gateway, which was a coastal zone management grant that the Natural Resources has submitted. The committee also did a site visit to Sconset, and this was led by Jeff Carlson. The members saw the current physical conditions from ground level view from Codfish Park almost to Sankaty Lighthouse, and they learned about the landscape, different coastal engineering structures being used for erosion control, which forces are a significant threat at each location, and if at each location the beach was either accreting or eroding. And there's a really nice 5-minute video that Morgan Sale made from that site visit that's on the CRAC website. Next slide. CRAC also talked about the best next steps for Sconset Bluff coastal resilience. The select board had asked CRAC to provide an opinion on what the committee's advice would be for the best way moving forward. And the site visit really helped the members compile their thoughts, and they finalized some advice for Sconset Bluff, which will be presented at the next select board meeting. Next slide. We had a great presentation by Arnold Robinson, and he's an associate regional planning director at Fuss and O'Neill. And the project that he's been working on is called Market to Metacom, which is a climate resilience and economic development plan in Warren, Rhode Island. So they're working on an overall neighborhood plan that holistically addresses water quality and climate change challenges while promoting economic redevelopment. And the plan will serve as an example of how to combine green infrastructure and climate change actions such as retreat in a manner that attracts a shift in private investment while improving the overall resilience of the neighborhood. In their plan, they assessed and put money amounts on either taking no action or taking a phased relocation and restoration approach. So that project's really interesting, and we'll be following that pretty closely. The next is zoning bylaw review tool. This was published by the EPA SNEP program, so the Southeast New England program and Mass Audubon. And the goal of the bylaw is to build, the tool is to build community resilience through local regulations, compare local land use regulations with best practices, and assist communities in applying cost-effective, low-impact development techniques. Carl Borchert from the planning board, he introduced this tool to us. And so we went through it, and he recommended that Plus explores the tool because they know all of the policies really well and what would work for Nantucket. Next slide. The next one is discussion on finance and policy topics. So CRAC is going to explore how to develop and implement funding opportunities for coastal resilience projects. If you're not aware, the plan has 40 projects within it, and if they're all implemented, it'll cost upwards of $900 million. The projects recommended also should be implemented in the next 10 to 15 years. So we've got to figure out a funding tool that is sustainable for these projects and for maintenance of the projects. And then within the CRP, there are many policy recommendations. So CRAC's really going to dive deep and see which ones should be worked on and implemented within the next year. We had a presentation from Rachel Freeman at Nantucket Islands Land Bank about the real estate acquisitions, which were at town meeting, 31 Easy Street. And in that, it's a critical piece of land for the town and also the Steamship Authority for coastal resilience planning. And it also gives a potential to expand Easy Street Park. And with that, the last slide is requests and recommendations. So CRAC has recommended that the town hire a dedicated grant writer. Like I'd mentioned, these projects are really expensive, and grants are, especially federal and state grants, are really competitive. So it's hard for staff to know exactly what to put in those grants. And so it'd be really beneficial to the town as a whole to be able to have a professional grant writer to be able to help with this. And then CRAC also recommends including coastal resilience within the select board strategic plan. And with that, if there's any current or upcoming issues that the select board would like CRAC's advice, we are open to that.
It was, crack was mentioned today at governance. And one of the things we talked about was how do we support crack and make sure that the funding and things get started so that we are not another year behind.
Great.
So it is on people's minds. So
That's great. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And now town managers report.
Okay, so the status of the potential warrant articles for the November 7th special town meeting is that we have prepared a draft, very kind of rough draft warrant, and it is starting to get reviewed by the people who need to review articles, including town council. So what I would like to do is take you through the articles, and I sent you all a draft, I think yesterday, maybe, or the day before, but it's a dynamic document and it changes quite frequently at this stage of the process. So also, as we're going through here, the articles are placed here sort of intentionally and sort of randomly. The very first articles 1 through 5 or 6 are specifically short-term rental related, because I think that is the purpose of the special town meeting. And then I sort of place them in possible order of controversy or potential discussion, with more discussion happening earlier on. And keep in mind that we do need to finish this town meeting in one night. So Article 1 right now, and the article numbers are all, subject to change, but also kind of be thinking as you're going through it, if you are good with the order or not. And I will rely on John or John Giorgio or Judy Barrett to take us through these. I don't think anything's changed too much here. I did want to point out a couple of things. You can't quite see my comment there, but that recommendation there is to insert a designation in the use chart. And I was just asking that, maybe suggesting we should probably have this chart on file somewhere so that people can see it. It's very, very long and kind of cumbersome. It's in the code, but it's like an 11 by 17 or large piece of paper. So we'll have to get it filed with the town clerk's office, and people can look at it there. And perhaps at town meeting, we'll have a link to it if people want to take a look. So I don't think anything has really changed on this article since you reviewed it at your last meeting. Is that right, John?
Yes, that's correct, Libby.
Okay.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I did. Thank you. I don't know. Do you all want to discuss these as they come up and or take public comment on them as they come up, or do you want to go through it all first? Oh, sorry. Yeah.
I need to.
I don't mind walking through the whole warrant and then maybe going back to the short-term rental work, the articles at the end. So Don can sit while we're just being informed, and then
that sounds.
And maybe if there's any questions about non-short-term rental, we can take them as we go through them and then save the discussion for short-term rental.
Is that okay?
After.
Okay, sure.
Okay, or vice versa.
Let's save that.
Okay.
To the end.
Okay.
Okay, so Article 2 right now is the general bylaw amendment proposed, and I don't think that changed either. Well, maybe a little bit of minor formatting, but let's see if there's any comments in there. Don't think so. Anything you want to add, John or Judy?
I don't believe there've been any substantive changes since these articles were first presented.
Okay, so same with Article 3. That's the other general bylaw amendment.
Mm-hmm.
Same as what was reviewed at your meeting last time. Article 4 would be the acceptance of a general law for a to adopt a community impact fee for professionally managed short-term rentals. That's pretty straightforward. I was a little confused on my own about whether or not there was a second potential acceptance to adopt the community impact fee on owner occupied, but that was actually not recommended. So you can see it's stricken. And then Article 6 would be to establish a special purpose, well, now Article 5, to establish special purpose stabilization fund for affordable housing and dedication of short-term rental impact fees to the fund. I think that's the same. There haven't been any changes there. So those are the short-term rental articles, not unchanged primarily from last time. The airport is seeking a zoning map change. And I honestly am not the person to explain this. It came through Plus in the airport, and I don't know. I don't think Noah is online, but if there's questions, we can get them answered. The next article is a real estate conveyance. It's a conservation area adjacent to the Surfside wastewater treatment facility to the land bank. This is in order for the town to comply with a natural heritage and endangered species permit for the Surfside treatment plant, which has been outstanding for several years now. So this is kind of just a compliance issue.
We're not taking space that would be needed for the plant to move at any point.
No. We talked about that extensively. The next article is some acquisitions of authorization to acquire easements for the Surfside area road improvements and water main extensions. And this, we've gone back and forth on this because initially we thought maybe the county could take these, but it turns out the county cannot take utility easements, and this will involve utility easements. So this is going to be a necessary article so that the town can have the authority to acquire easements so that we can do these improvements. Okay, the next are two companion articles. This home rule petition relates to the acquisition of property. It's a conservation restriction really held by the land council for the purpose of a bike path easement on Somerset Lane. And that, because it's a conservation restriction, requires a home rule petition. And, oh, right. Actually, there was going to be a companion article, but now it's been determined or suggested that we undertake this actual taking, authorized an actual taking or acquisition through the county. So we won't need a town meeting vote for that, just the home rule petition. The next article, I think we've mentioned this to you all several times in the past year or so. At the 2022 and 2023 annual town meetings, a sum of $1 million in each year was appropriated under Article 8, the annual operating budget, for the purpose of a pilot program for town employee rental expenses. And the idea was to try to help town employees who are extremely challenged with rentals payment wise, to somehow offset that. Long story short, that turned out to be extremely complicated, much more complicated than we ever imagined to even come up with a program. So at the 2022 annual town meeting, we actually had a technical amendment for this particular article, which specified this program. So we were hesitant to reallocate the funds for something else because it was so specific at town meeting. So our proposal would be to transfer that sum so that we can use it for something else, specifically developing town employee housing. And we have some specific ideas on that. For example, among other things, the possibility of the development of town-owned parcels along Tacoma Way for town employee housing. And we have something underway with that. The next article would be an appropriation for no-deer playing fields and some other associated improvements. And as you will recall, and there's a little note there that basically explains it, this article is a debt exclusion, and a debt exclusion appropriation requires 2 votes, one of town meeting, one a ballot vote at an election. This article did not pass at the 2023 annual town meeting. However, it did pass at the subsequent election. So we have the necessary affirmative ballot vote, but we do not have the necessary affirmative town meeting vote. So in discussions with you all, it seemed like you would be willing to put it back on for a town meeting vote. And you have since had Park and Rec manager in here explaining the details of the project, some of the concerns at town meeting related to maintenance, both ongoing and in prior years, which I believe have been addressed at this point.
I've actually tucked in there a couple of times and looked and checked, and they are, I think the irrigation is actually on and the grass is actually green. There aren't brown spots everywhere. So I think there has been improvement, which is good.
Thank you, Matt. It is a lot better. And part of that is due to our being able to secure a landscaping company to take care of the fields. Okay, next is a supplemental appropriation for upgrades to the South Valley Sewer Pump Station. And I guess long story short is in 2020, when this article had an initial appropriation, it was anticipated the upgrades to the pump station were anticipated to be a certain amount. Now 3 going into 4 years later, that amount is much higher. And there is intended to be a sharing of the cost with this, with the Richmond Development Group. And I think I'd look to town council and or finance director to review the details of this article if need be. Okay, so if you want to come back to that one, if necessary. Okay, the next 2 are supplemental appropriations in anticipation of potential bids that may exceed original appropriation. So the first one is construction of town employee housing. This is the town employee housing project located at the rear of this complex along Waite Drive, and it's started out as being seasonal housing, which it mostly still will be. However, we are going to be trying to work in some year-round apartments in there as well. And based on recent pricing of other municipal projects across the region and here, we are simply anticipating that there may be a need for a supplemental appropriation. The project will be going out to bid shortly, and we will have a number in advance of town meeting. So this is sort of a preemptive article in the event that we need additional funding. And that funding can potentially come from some existing funding sources. The next one is similar with airport housing. And they asked basically the same thing. They will be going out to bid as well before a town meeting, and we'll have a number. Hopefully they and us will have enough money, but we're not sure yet. The next article is in connection with nationwide settlements for opioid lawsuits nationally throughout the country. And we would like to put our settlement payments into a special purpose stabilization fund. So we need to amend prior votes. We already have a special purpose substance abuse stabilization fund, but certain revenues go into it. And this is expanding the revenue allowances under the fund to allow the settlements to go in there. Is that pretty much it, John?
Yes.
Thank you.
So,
yep.
just to clarify, existing fund, just broadening what we can put in there.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. That's better. The next item is to again amend the description of the public works facility improvements design. So at 2018 annual town meeting, we appropriated funding for design of a new or public works facility improvements at 188 Nantucket Road. Subsequent to that, the coastal resiliency plan came out, and there were concerns that 188 Nantucket might not be ultimately a long-term home for DPW complex. So we started to look at 10 Sun Island Road, which is property under the jurisdiction of the airport. And we've given you a couple of presentations on this. Since then, we have also started looking, because of potential concerns with rent that the airport would be charging the town in accordance with their FAA requirements. We started looking at 1 Shadbush Road, which is the property that has been designated for the Nantucket Hunting Association. We have talked to the Hunting Association, and the idea here would be that potentially there could be a sharing of that site. And But in order to further the design potential there, we need to amend the description of the appropriation in order for those funds to be able to be used for that purpose. 8 Nichols Road, I think if Vicky's on, maybe she could explain this further if need be, but this evidently is something that has already been gone through all of our processes for taking and acquisition. However, I guess it's taken such a long time that the land court is now requiring that there be another town meeting vote to confirm it. Is that right, Vicky?
Not
Something
quite.
like
The property description in the town meeting vote designated the assessor's map and parcel as map 92.4 parcel 139. And it was determined that it should be parcel 199 instead. So the land court is requiring that we have an amendment to the order of taking, which we've already done, to correct the property description. And so this article will accomplish that purpose. And then we can actually transfer this property to the buyers who have already who have already paid for this property.
Thank you, Vicky. So
You're
just
welcome.
let you explain that in the first place. And that's something of a new article. It wasn't on your list until now. The next article is amending the elected official compensation schedule so as to increase the salary of the town clerk. The town clerk's salary by law requires a vote of town meeting. And this is in line with the compensation and classification study that we completed a few months ago. So we since we were having a special town meeting, we hoped that it would be okay to add the town clerk's salary to that instead of having to wait till the annual. And the next.
Libby, that will require a 2/3 vote
Okay,
because you're changing the salary of an elected official at a special town meeting.
okay, John, thank you. Well, I'll add that wording. The next 3 articles are citizen petitions. All of them are sewer district map changes, and our staff is going through those now, and we will be scheduling a public hearing. I forget if we have it scheduled yet. Is it in September, Erica? The hearing, so we, as you all know, we have, in accordance with the Sewer Act, we have a public hearing on this, and you all will hear what the recommendations are of the staff group, and they have some criteria that are applied to requests for sewer district map changes. And I think that is it. So just to remind you, we're getting close with finishing this, and you are scheduled to adopt it at your meeting on August 16th. And then a lot of other things start happening, advertising, FinCom public hearings, and things of that nature. Also, sidebar, you'll probably want to elaborate on this, but we've been receiving some inquiries from citizens specifically about short-term rental, the proposals and how it might impact individual property owners. So Brooke had a very good suggestion recently, which was maybe we should think about scheduling some public information sessions between once the warrant is adopted and town meeting, to invite people in to ask questions about how it might impact them. And from there, we could develop some FAQs to be posted online that could be updated as we go. And I think we probably already have 2 or 3 of those. So that's it.
Okay, I'm going to recuse myself for the short term.
I got one comment on just on Surfside and in general, in Surfside and South Shore. When we were doing those, I was advocating for betterments. Part of what I do is that, you know, if there's overruns, then it is shared. And and sometimes I think people think that the town has a big pile of money and can pay all this stuff. And, you know, we have to make tough choices and not do certain things. You know, I think if we're taking things, we should get them up to snuff beforehand. Look, and it seems sometimes that the town ends up getting the short stick of it, the short stick on these things. Part of the pump station, I mentioned this last time, I can't help myself. Part of the good part for the pump station was that that was going to be a lot cheaper than if, you know, building a whole new station. And so, you know, upgrade was going to be a lot less than building a whole station, but now it's going to be more expensive and we're supposed to kick in again. So I think that there's things like that where we have to make sure we're advocating for the taxpayers and for the town. And I think it's important that we be aware of that. That's all.
And anything else before I recuse? Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Brooke to chair for the discussion of the short-term rental articles.
So I've been thinking about how to proceed with this, and I think, we left it at the last discussion with a question to the board. Are there parts of now the draft warrant that any of you would like to discuss, proposed changes, et cetera? I think we start with the board and where it's at, and or questions, or we'll just go back through it now that it's in front of us in draft form. So anyone?
I'll speak first. I've spent as much time as I could over the last 2 weeks. I have trying to, in my own head, understand what the impacts will be of all the various recommendations. I've spoken to Matt Haffenreffer, I've spoken to John Giorgio yesterday, and I have some things about that to fill people in. I'm getting closer to sort of what I, sort of understanding, and then being able to maybe change aspects of it to see if they'd be better or worse. But I haven't got all the way there yet. What would be the last date that we could have? When does this absolutely have to be done? And what about, is it going to print? When does it go to print? All right, so it has to be done by then.
Hard deadline, yeah.
Okay, because I think as it stands now, I think it's gonna be, I think it could be contentious. My goal, I think there's a lot of good stuff in there that should be fleshed out, and try to get it closer to something that I think can get an 80% vote. And my feeling is it's not there, and I think that would be a shame because of what the work that has been done. And the other part about it that's tricky is that anything that is more restrictive will not be, any amendment that's more restrictive will not be allowed. That has been confirmed by Sarah Alger. And so I think that means that just about nothing can be changed in this. If that's the interpretation, it will be very hard to find things that are less restrictive. And so I think that we have to take that into consideration, because if in the course of public meetings and and there are some details that I still think were left to us to figure out, things like that I don't think are yet, things like, oh, what is it? There's I'm having a brain fart.
You're doing quite well. Just keep.
I know, I was, but now I'm struggling. No, but there are some things that were left to us that we have to figure out. One of them is to make sure there aren't loopholes, and that the definitions of are solid, and that some of that may need some more work. There's other things that may have impacts on this, is how much is the fee going to be? If the fee is, because the way I read this is, one is every entity is going to be able to put their hand up 60 days after this is passed and after it's legal. And they're going to be able to say, hey, I want to do this and I want to do 9. And they're going to be grandfathered, not in grandfathering, but grandfathered in the bylaw to do 9. And so the question, so you'd say, okay, that's, that's 12,500 homes, 3,000 or so do it now. How many more will get in? We don't know. And so is that something, there's aspects like that. And people go, well, Matt, they should all be able to do it. But I said, what I try to explain to them is maybe, and it would depend what it costs. If it costs $100, then everyone's going to do it. If it's $1,000 every year, then not that many people will do it. And some of those details are not sort of known yet. And so I think that there are aspects like that that will impact this going forward. I think there's there's a couple things like that I still would like to get some more clarity on and work on. And I would like to bring that to the, this short-term rental work group with some of these things fleshed out a little bit. And I'm almost there. I'm probably half, 3/4, but I'm not all the way there.
Anybody else?
couple- The print date is when? Just 2 weeks from now? Why is it so short?
Just to review the calendar, the adoption of the warrant is scheduled to occur on the 16th. We need a lead time for publication in the paper. Publication in the paper would happen on August 24th. The warrant is sent to the FinCom, and there are notice requirements for the FinCom public hearings, which will happen end of August, early September. The planning board motions have to be developed. The FinCom has a public hearing scheduled for September 21st, and there are other meetings scheduled in the calendar for FinCom action on motions. The FinCom adopts its motions on September 28th. The board will review its comments and maybe any potential motions on October 4th. And again, there's a lead time even more so with the warrant with motions, because that warrant gets mailed to voters and it has to go to the printer and then the mail shop. And then there has to be 2 weeks. The voters are expected to receive them at least 2 weeks prior to the town meeting. So that can't be sent exactly 2 weeks before. It has to be sent several days before that to ensure that people will get it on time per the charter. All to be done for November 7th.
We've had placeholders. How have people done that before? And then that's been inserted at the last part. So we've put a placeholder in and an article that
Well,
wasn't fleshed out, and then that has been done. It's planning does it occasionally.
well, what would happen is there would be an article that would perhaps be kind of a framework that a motion would fill in, but that gets a little tricky. And John, you can probably speak to this as to whether or not the motion is within the scope of the article.
Yes, so I took it upon myself to have a email exchange with the town moderator. Because at the meeting 2 weeks ago, a suggestion was made by, I believe it was Matt, that we consider changing Article 1 from a yes meaning allowed as of right to an A meaning an accessory use. And so I posed the question to Sarah, and her initial reaction, and of course, nothing is final until she sees all of the wording, but her initial reaction was a floor amendment that changed Article 1 from a yes to an A would be more restrictive, and in this context, therefore, would be outside the scope. And so she wouldn't let that amendment on the floor. Matt and I did discuss another possibility, which would be essentially inserting in the warrant an alternative to Article 1, which instead of saying Y would say A, meaning it would be allowed as an accessory use. And in my discussions with Matt, he was asking me whether we could change the concept of accessory use specifically for short-term rentals and put in some limitations. And I think the answer to that question is yes, we could certainly craft something like that. And so Matt, I know took it from our meeting that he was going to think about some various options. So I think the other thing that I just wanted to mention now that I have the floor, so to speak, is there has been quite a bit of discussion about if this packet of bylaws or town meeting articles passed, then it would be town meeting could in the future amend the general bylaw regulations by a simple majority vote rather than a 2/3 vote. And I have had some preliminary discussions with the Attorney General's office, and they have confirmed my view that by statute, general bylaws only require a majority vote, and that you could not impose on a future town meeting a requirement for a 2/3 vote to amend a general bylaw. There may be the ability in the Article 1, which is to allow short-term rentals as of right. It also could potentially apply to an alternative article, allowing it as a accessory use, to make it clear that the as of right or accessory use is only with respect to the regulations that are contained in the general bylaw under Article 2, so that any future amendment to the general bylaws, which, yes, would only require a majority vote. However, unless the zoning was amended at that time as well, those new changes would not be protected as either as of right or accessory use, because they would no longer comply with the general bylaw requirements. I am frankly not a fan of that. I think it's going to create a regulatory structure that's going to be very complex and complicated. And just picture 10 years down the road, what the interpretation problems that could arise with that kind of a regulatory structure in place. And I did not have the opportunity to discuss this with Judy Barrett. I don't know if Judy has any initial thoughts about that. I think it is potentially legal to do that, but I'm not, I don't think I would recommend it, only for the reasons I've stated.
Yeah, we did, Judy Barrett, I'm on the meeting. I don't know if you can see me, but we did discuss it briefly, John, and I think I kind of agree with you that although in some ways that change to Article 1 or 2 about tying the definition to the to Article 2 may address some of the concerns that people have about, well, what if town meeting changes the general bylaw in the future? I'm just concerned about administratively what that's going to do and the issues that may create for the town. So yeah, legally, I think you can do that. It's a question of whether administratively, management wise, from the perspective of a private property owner, does any of that work? So it may be legal, but not necessarily advisable.
So then the last point I wanted to make was when I had my discussion by email with the town moderator, she raised a concern about making sure that any warrant article making an accessory use allowed, that it not fall prey to what's called a repetitive zoning petition based upon the article that was passed at the Maytown meeting. I don't think we have a problem with that. I need to sit down and maybe have a further discussion with the moderator. But the impact, if it is a repetitive zoning petition, then it cannot be considered by town meeting without a positive recommendation from the planning board. But I'm not convinced myself that this would be a repetitive zoning petition, because I think it's fundamentally different than what was proposed at the Maytown meeting. So I think there are ways, legal ways, to achieve some of the goals that at least I know Matt has been looking for. But it's really going to be up to the select board to decide in which direction you want to proceed.
Thank you, John. Malcolm, did you want to?
Yeah,
we kind of gone
I'll
into
still go
the
back.
legal
We've
stuff.
gone a long way from my question here. But after it goes to the finance committee, et cetera, they will still have things printed in it about their recommendations. So so the real final print is that not till after the finance committee looks at it.
There's two printings, basically. There's the actual warrant with no motions that must be put out. It doesn't need to be advertised, but our tradition is to advertise it, and it does need to be posted. And that is the document that the finance committee, the select board, and the planning board use to develop the motions. And then there's a subsequent document, the booklet, I guess I didn't bring it with me, but the warrant booklet that gets mailed to you, that is the final printing, but that takes a lead time because of meetings, development of motions, legal review, public hearing, timeline requirements, all of that sort of thing. Brooke and I did talk yesterday about what time could potentially be worked in here. And the problem is that you'd have to have another meeting between now and the end of the month. And that's just going to be extra work for everybody, which is fine if that's what the board wants to do. It will extend a little bit the timing, and it might necessitate some rescheduling of some of the hearings, maybe not that much, but we had already built in time prior to the 16th to have these discussions. So there was intended to be sufficient time built in before the 16th.
So we have an appointment on the 16th, so it'd be having. So maybe we'd get a week if we had a meeting on the 23rd. Give you a week, that's not much.
Yeah, it's gonna be what it's gonna be. It's either gonna, if it's not possible, it's not possible. And you know.
Are we saying that we need 3 weeks instead of 2 weeks to get whatever questions need to be answered?
I think I've got most of it answered. I think what I'm trying to figure out now is I'm trying to figure out what's the impact of what has been presented. You know, like there's different types. There's a short-term rental, there's a commercial short-term rental, there's year-round houses, there's the loss of year-round houses. Those are like sort of the 4 categories that they're working on off of. What is presented do to those? And what would anything that changes do, you know, any one change, what would that do? You know, to those over, say, 5 or 10 years. You know, that's what I've been trying to understand. And I think that, and I'm not, you know, and this, I'm just speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for you guys. I'm just, you know, I think, so that's what I'm trying to understand. And if there's any, so let's say we don't, that we just vote it and it's voted through and we let the voters decide. If in the course of the public hearing process, we realize, oh my God, we need to change something, you know, because we didn't see this, we didn't, you know, we didn't think this was going to be this way. How do we change it? If it's more restrictive, you know, you can't do it.
We can't do it.
So, you know, that I think, you know, so I think we're putting ourselves in a situation. If ideally, forget it's this issue. If you're trying to go to town meeting, you kind of want to go with something that you actually can amend if it needs to amend. If we're going with something that really can't be amended, it's an up or down vote again. And that's happened with 42. That was an up or down. Are you with us or against us? And, you know, and I think that's unfortunately what we're setting up again. When I think some of the concerns could be addressed. So.
Madam Chair.
John?
I just wanted to mention 2 things about the scope of the article and whether it would be amendable. I think the initial indication from the moderator was specific to a floor amendment that changed Article 1 from a Y use to an A use. And in that circumstance, she thought that it would be beyond the scope and, you know, likely wouldn't approve that kind of an amendment. We haven't gotten any indication from the moderator on any other amendments because for one thing, we need to actually see them. And of course, Sarah, being the careful lawyer that she is, indicated that any final decision would depend upon the actual wording of any amendments presented. So I don't think it's as simple as saying it's more restrictive. The real question is, were the voters adequately warned in both the warrant and the notice of the planning board hearing? And that's really going to depend very specifically on what amendments are made from the floor or what substitute motion might be made. The other thing that I wanted to mention was I neglected to inform the board about one other possibility that I did discuss with Matt, which is if the concern is the 2/3 versus the majority vote, I think there would be a possibility to put all of the short-term regulations into the zoning bylaw. And not do it by general bylaw, with one, however, very important exception. And that is the prohibition on commercial short-term rentals. Because although the statute says that the town may regulate short-term rentals by class of ownership, there's a very long-standing principle of zoning in Massachusetts that you cannot regulate by zoning the class of ownership. So if the board wants to go that route and put all of these regulations in the zoning bylaw, subjected to a 2/3 vote plus any future amendments, I would recommend that you not include the corporate ownership in the zoning bylaw, but that you leave it in the general bylaw. I see Judy is shaking her head, so I assume she concurs with
I
that.
completely agree. That's what we had discussed, John. I
Yep.
keep it out of the zoning.
So we're at a place where we have to decide, is this board going to rewrite what was presented to us in the next 2, potentially 3 weeks? How far are we going to stray from what was recommended by people who worked for 10 months and came to us with recommendations? That is a question I need to ask all of you, because time is running out. And to my mind, 10 months were spent discussing this, and we have recommendations before us. And I'm very uncomfortable making substantive changes or changing the entire direction of this toward putting it in the zoning bylaw after that group worked for a very long time and arrived at a consensus to present this to us. Whether we agree, whether our fears individually are met or alleviated through what's been before us, I don't feel comfortable taking this on with the 4 of us in the next 2 weeks, rewriting these bylaws.
Do you feel that if we bring this forward, it will be successful?
I can't guarantee anything, Matt.
Yeah.
Honestly, I can't guarantee anything.
Yeah.
There are loud voices who've articulated hard no, we won't do it if this happens. There are a lot of quiet voices that we don't hear from. And frankly, the voices that brought this to us had many meetings. This was a lengthy public process. And I feel very uncomfortable having the discussion at the depth we're talking about virtually starting this from scratch. So that's kind of where I'm at. I think that there may be some changes around the margins to address some of the concerns about, is it strict enough, or are we going too broad and it's harder to rein it in later? I have some thoughts about that, but I would not feel comfortable throwing this out and going back and trying to write this as a zoning bylaw.
Right. That's also not what I'm suggesting.
Okay.
So, what I'm suggesting is there are some tweaks that we should understand.
Okay.
Because I think that some of the things that we think are going to be good may not be. And that's the concern I have. I think there's I've talked about it. I think there could be a rush to the registry, a rush to have everybody do this, depending what the cost is, which we don't know yet. So I think that's one thing to think about among a bunch of other things, but that's a key one. I think there's some people that I think that the yes on the zoning is a non-starter. And I think that one of the good things I think that the work group has done is they've defined what an accessory use is. They've defined it as 4 rentals or less a summer. And everyone's going to be allowed to do that going forward. I think that definition is in there. Now that's, they didn't call it that. They didn't say we're defining it, but And I think that does a lot of good things. I think that is giving incentive for people to, to plan that and put that into action. And it might slow down the proliferation of it. It might slow down the commercial, even if, if it's only 4 and you can't. And it might slow down some of the challenges that are going to come from either side of this. So I think that's a really good thing, but it would have to be defined, and you can't have a big Y. I worry that if we have a big Y, it's going to be a target. It's going to be a target for, for people, for one side of this, because as soon as they can overturn something that was under Commerce Clause or in some other manner, they're going to come after it. And once that, I have a hard time with that part of it. And I still do. I'm trying to find a way through that. And I'm working in good faith, and I'm talking to everybody, and, and I've been I've been bringing this up all along, but so.
Madam Chair, through you to Judy. Judy, I know you came to many of our meetings, and you said several times that you struggled with the Y or the N in the chart and arrived on what you thought was the better decision. Would you maybe for another time sort of kind of elaborate what you think on why you came to that decision?
Yeah, I mean, there were a couple of factors. One was, I think I was persuaded by the desire, as I understood it, to resolve any lack of clarity about the status of people who are doing short-term rentals in terms of potential litigation, neighbors versus neighbors and so forth. So if you were able to say, this is what's permitted, subject to this general bylaw, that would work. I also spoke with the Attorney General's office about this because I had some concerns, and it was kind of through that conversation that the pairing of the zoning bylaw being kind of an admittedly simple proposal, but tied to the general bylaw was really a rather elegant solution. Now, I understand not everyone feels that way. And I also recognize that there is this concern about the general bylaw being an easier thing to change down the road. I guess my view is communities that have town meeting trust their town meetings to do the right thing. And I don't mean to be oversimplistic about it, but that's just my view of things. And I also understand that town meeting, can change its mind, about zoning. It can change its mind about any number of things. So if town meeting decided later to make some changes to the general bylaw, that would be, in town meeting's wisdom at that point in time. But as for the idea that somehow it's not sufficient control to have all these regulations in the general bylaw and allow the use to simply stand as permitted, I got over that because I could see how those two things can connect. Again, recognizing that not everyone agrees. I think that the information that you can put into the general bylaw as kind of a whole set of regulations to control this operation, this activity, makes a lot of sense to me. So for the sake of simplicity, I became convinced that the Y approach was correct. The reason that we changed the CI district to N was simply to try to be as consistent with your existing zoning as possible. You don't allow dwelling units in that district, so it made no sense to say short-term rentals would be allowed. So we were trying to be more consistent with what the zoning says today. I think the other thing that I would say is that when you go down the path of saying something's accessory, in my world as a planner, the question is accessory to what? And I've never heard a good answer to that question. When you say this is an accessory use, what is it accessory to? So I think you have to kind of think about that as well.
Madam Chair, Judy, it's so in kind of as you were talking about the elegant solution, so conceivably town meeting could come, I'm just going to make this up, but come in next year and say, oh, well, this wasn't restrictive enough. Let's do a cap at 2,500 or whatever the number would be. And therefore it would be kind of a cleaner way of regulating it through the general bylaw that is more simple than doing it in zoning. Correct?
Yes, especially for that kind of change, because you don't have the problem of grandfathering.
But, all right, so here, how we're proposing to do it is outside of, currently is outside of zoning. And it's anyone who signs up within 60 days is gonna have this right, correct? So if we go and change that outside of zoning, does that still apply? And I do like the elegant solution. I thought that was a good suggestion. You know, because my understanding is once you you allow the use, you can't take that use away. Or you can, but the ones who have it get to keep it. And that's the crux of it for me.
So I got to defer to John on this point, Matt, but if it's in the general bylaw, it's a different legal standard than if it's in zoning. John, I think you're on mute.
It's only allowed, Matt, as a matter of zoning if it complies with the general bylaw.
Right. That was the point.
So the general bylaw supersedes the right in zoning to operate a short-term rental. Compliance with and following the regulations in the general bylaw supersedes that. And that's where the flexibility of being able to amend the general bylaw based on future conditions to adapt over time without then risking some grandfathering of what was defined as an accessory use at some point.
The grandfathering is strict in what you can do and how you can do it. What I'm at with the question I'm asking is if you put it in the bylaw, a form of grandfathering in the bylaw, and then you attempt to take that away. Let's say we're going to do what we're planning to do, which is any one of 12,000 people can sign up on the dotted line. And then we decide that we want to do Tom's suggestion with 2,500. Do all the people that signed up have have any recourse on that, John?
Okay.
We've just changed
There's
it.
no such thing as grandfathering with the general
bylaw.
If you remove that section of the general bylaw, then the remaining regulations in the general bylaw would apply to everyone across the board on the date that bylaw becomes effective. And it would not be an issue as a protected use under zoning, because from the very beginning, the allowed as of right must comply with whatever general bylaw regulations are in place. So I think it's important. The big distinction is a zoning bylaw regulates use.
Right. Thank you.
The general bylaw regulates the operation. And I know that's maybe a difficult concept to grasp, but they're two very different things. So, for example, Matt, you could take the general bylaw and take the grandfathering provision out and then approve the warrant. You could do that, but that would mean that all of the prohibitions in the general bylaw take effect and affect everyone across the board immediately. And I think, I'm not going to speak for the work group, but they understood that and they did not want to create that kind of a situation in town. And so that's why they opted for what I would call an optional grandfathering provision.
I think that comparison of the use and the operation is really critical, because I really can't operate a short-term rental in my building unless I comply with the general bylaw. So, because that's what allows me to operate the short-term rental. So in some ways, the use itself, it's almost an illusion. It's like it's there, it's in the zoning bylaw, but it has really no meat unless that use is legal with respect to the general bylaw.
But Judy, it does have an important salutary effect, which is removing the legal jeopardy that exists now, because short-term rentals are not specifically regulated as a use in your current zoning bylaw.
Which is why we did this.
Right.
That's why we suggested this. So again, back to your question, Tom, that's how I ended up getting there, is understanding that really critical distinction between the use and the operation.
Okay, thanks, you guys. Matt, do you have any follow-up to that?
I can't believe that there's no rights vested. I can't believe that you could come in with a 50% vote the next year and take everybody's rights away. Pack the hall and take them all away because it's in a bylaw. Do something completely different than, or go the other way. I just don't believe that. So I find that, I think you would face a lot of litigation. I think you'd face a lot of people saying that, that we had this is vested. We've got a Y over here, and we were acted in good faith and made our choices on this aspect of it here in the bylaw. And what are you doing, changing it so much? So I think that there's legal exposure there. I understand why people are saying, let's, if we do this, we'll take care of the litigation that's going on. I worry that we're going to be creating more litigation. So I think we're going to be creating more litigation than just that. When this happens, I think and I've heard threats from both sides I talked to everybody. I've heard threats from both sides on this one. So I don't think that the litigation that this is like a simplistic and it's going away thing, which is why I'm trying to understand it to a different level than I do now.
And I appreciate that, Matt. I really do. My instinct says there's money at stake. We're always going to be at risk of litigation if someone's financial interests, they feel their financial interests have been harmed. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not the attorney general. We have professionals who are seeking out the answers to these questions. And I mean, not believing it is, I guess, each of our right to say we don't believe it's the case. I don't know that we can eliminate all risk with this. Don't think we can eliminate risk that it won't pass at town meeting. I don't think we can eliminate risk that there will be unintended consequences, because that's what happens. I mean, I don't know where to go from here. If other than if there are concrete suggestions as to changes, which is where I left us off at the end of the last time we discussed this. I'd hope they would come tonight so that we could actually discuss them. It doesn't sound like you're ready.
No, some of the questions were just answered yesterday, so I'm working on it. And with some, and ideally, I wouldn't want to put a competing article. I think what we should be doing is having an article that is, that is broadly supported from both sides. And when I don't listen to my gut, whether that's in the bakery or business or here, when I don't follow my gut, I usually make a mistake. And my gut is telling me that this isn't there yet. And my gut is telling me that there's, more that I have to understand. And it's going to be what it's going to be. I've been out on my own on certain items and issues before, and I'm fine with that, but I have to listen to my gut on this.
Are there any specific things that we can talk about tonight? Or are we pushing all of this until 2 weeks from now on the last day potentially we have to discuss this?
Well, I think so. Some of the issues, I mean, again, I think that connecting the two is a positive. The elegant solution, I think that's a positive. I think defining, my own opinion, I think defining what a short-term, what is allowable. I think that would, in making it accessory and defining it. When people say, what is accessory? I can answer that. I think accessory is when a house is a house and it's only rented 4 times a summer. That's accessory. And I think that is what has, and I'm not against. I've been talking about grandfathering from the beginning. I'm not against. I don't think we should be taking away from existing people. I think if they've been doing it, they should be allowed to do it. Maybe that should sunset over time or change, or you follow what the group is saying, which is when it changes from a family, it goes away and goes to the 4, like everyone else, that's great. And when you start, when I start thinking about it, I start thinking numbers. You know, like some of the numbers that we have, how many new ones are gonna be added? What are they gonna be? Like those are the, you have to, like, sort of, I'm trying to work through that part of it. So, there was a sunrise. You know, we could talk about a sunrise. Do we want everybody to, within 5 years, to be able to be back to 9? You know, is that something that makes sense for, you know, for the island? You know, or should that be peeled away?
Do we want to, I mean,
That's what I'm asking.
so I'm willing to have that conversation. If that's on the, if that's something that you're concerned about, I'm willing to have that conversation now. I mean, I feel like if there are, you know, if there are items we can address tonight and maybe agree on, we've made progress toward hearing each other and making changes that feel comfortable to the 4 of us. I mean, that's what I was hoping would happen tonight. I don't want to kick that down and try to do it all next week.
Yeah.
Or we'll be here all night. So.
But I also, and part of my, I was hoped to take some, get some of this into, you know, into my understanding, to understand what things to maybe change, to bring those to the work group. You know, I would feel, you know, you're uncomfortable bringing it to town meeting. I'm a little uncomfortable sort of not having it in the format I should to bring that to, you know, for their consideration. I know they're not officially a group any longer, but I think respectfully, they have done, you know, a lot of work, and I think there's some good stuff in there. So.
And in what form are you bringing it to the work group? By what means?
Probably by, you know, by face to face, probably by, you know, me saying, hey, here's what I'm thinking. What do you think? You know, that would be what I would be doing. But maybe that's.
It's.
Or, you know, or.
Yeah.
Or give me a, you know, I don't want to do a separate article. But understanding that it won't be able to be changed, then give me a, you know, give me a placeholder. You know, give me a placeholder and give me, you know, 2 weeks, give me a month, whatever. I'll put some, you know, if I have to do it like that, I don't want to do that. I won't, because I think it should be a 80%, 90% agreement.
Malcolm?
Well, Matt said he's out there alone. I'm with you, Matt. So you're not totally out there alone. My gut, it just doesn't all compute right for me. I've expressed my concerns before about the issue of grandfathering, about how we'd ever actually enforce this. We still don't have any kind of registry. And God knows if we ever will. So when we talk about maybe changes in May, I don't even know by then we'll have any information to make changes on. The whole thing, and I'm sorry we didn't, the board should have had this discussion maybe 6 months while the working group was working and given them some feedback. And it was our mistake. And I know there was opportunity, but we didn't do that well. And I did a lot of work, but I'm still not happy. And I'm still not convinced that the present proposed regulations are the best for the island at this time. We're going to end up with an island of nothing but restricted deeds and short-term rental properties and people with $20 million houses. And that's not the island I want to see. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I don't have any solution for you. And I'm concerned about bringing this forward. You know, if we say that select board supports this, obviously the whole select board doesn't support it, but at the same time, I think it's important that the people have a right to vote on it. I'm just spinning my wheels here. I'm not giving you very good suggestions. I'm just talking about what I feel and think. I think it's too late to do much of anything now. That's why I was kind of pushing is, could we expand this a little more time-wise? But I get the sense we have a week, even if Matt or I or Matt comes up with another warrant, another article. it deals with some of his concerns about accessory use. And I respect the working group for their work, and I respect our lawyers for their legal opinion, but it may not be the right opinion.
So the question I have, and I'll say it generally, what information, and maybe this is a question for our data analyst, is there data available, and is it predictive in the way that I'm hearing, Matt, you're needing to know what might happen if certain parts of this are in place? And is that even possible other than as an idea or a speculation or a feeling? Is there information available that if we ask the question, for instance, I'm struggling because I don't have anything concrete to talk about. We're still talking theoretical, and it's very hard to move in a direction until we have a concrete proposal or suggestion about what should be different. I mean, we have to move from the theoretical to the concrete between now and when this warrant has to be
Understood.
finalized.
Let's do it differently. Let's say, what will the existing do? What will, is that understandable? What is the existing going to do for the various over 5 or 10 years for the various housing types?
Is it possible to know that?
I think
is the question.
Are you talking about 100%? I would say no. Know it generally. I think that there's some, my own opinion is there's got to be some plus or minus, but we'll let Matt tell me I'm right or sort of wrong.
So I'd like to ask Matt a specific question, not what will it do? That's not really very helpful. What are we asking? Is the question, will restricting to 4 weeks for newly acquired or newly built properties reduce the number of new short-term rentals? Is that a question that we'd like answered? It's got to be.
Well, the question could be, what is this proposal going to do on the various housing types over 5 or 10 years? What's the impact going to be?
Okay, so having asked that question, Matt, is that knowable with the information we have? And how might you figure it out if you haven't already?
So I think that the challenge in the way that.
Just identify yourself,
My name is Matt Haffenreffer. I've done the data analytics work on the for the short-term rental working group. And I think the challenge with the questions that you guys want to ask and the questions that I can better answer are when your questions are loaded with all the variables that still contain all the components of the package. That's a hard thing to answer because you're you want me to unload all the variables at once and give you one answer, but I think you have to look to control parts of it. And so there's different, if you look at the 4 and the 9, they do different things. The 9 looks to limit the total number of rentals during peak season for people who have the upper limit in their allowable, people who will be grandfathered through the general bylaw you've proposed. And so what that does is it limits the number of times anyone can turn over during the peak season. And if you look at the impact of that number, it determines more or less how profitable being a short-term renter will be. In other words, if you take the market price and you fill it up as much as you can, we're going to know how many, you're going to limit how many times people can rent. The lower number is going to control for someone new, which is, I would look at it as your way of controlling how attractive is an investment in STRs. If you're new to this and you get a rental that can only be rented 4 times, it's less profitable than one that can be rented 9. Those different numbers are going to apply to all different properties differently. And the real challenge here is you're looking at them across a market where people don't set prices according to a scoreboard. There's no Vegas line. Everyone's deciding. And so even some of the questions, like people keep asking about the 5, if we set it at 9, does it reduce the number of rentals in the peak season by 5%? Well, that's just based on how many people did rent, or how many nights did rent that would have been beyond the limit. Those rentals could just find their way to other rentals that are available. And so if you want to really figure out what will this do, you have to look at the question across one specific variable or one specific policy change. And I think each different lever that the proposal includes have different impacts that you could try to isolate and look at. Will it be a positive or negative impact? Will it be major or insignificant, or when will it take place? But to measure what happens as a final outcome just has a lot of variables without you guys agreeing on which ones we're trying to control and why first. I know that's really a non-answer, but trying to provide it in a way that can help you guys shape the question that might get you all focused on what do you want to happen, or what is the concern of what you don't want to happen that maybe we can all agree on with questions that I can either answer or guide you to an answer for.
Madam Chair, I think we're just kind of running around in circles here. I think he's right. We're not going to know the outcome of anything that we're going to do here. I mean, again, my concern is that the present proposed regulations essentially don't change anything, in my opinion. So, you know, it delays things. Things are grandfathered. I've said it all before. I guess the issue is we have a board here of 4 people that would vote on this article, but when I got a little confused last meeting, we didn't vote on individual articles before we voted on the whole package. So if we come to that, you might anticipate a split board, or if the chairman is, I understand now, legally vote, maybe we should just open up the warrants and let the short-term working group put in their article as a citizens article, then we don't have to get all this aggravation that we're having now. I don't know if that's possible.
No.
I mean, we've opened up warrants before.
Technically, they'd have to get the signatures
That have to be,
to get the signatures.
I'm
Unless you-
just,
Unless you wanted to put them in select board for short-term rental work group, but if they're not convened anymore, it's sort of awkward.
yeah, it's a nice conversation we're having, but we're not getting anywhere. Matt has opinions, I have my opinions, you have your opinions. I don't think we're gonna get more data, who knows what that'll show. Once this is approved or not approved, who knows what will happen.
Yeah. Well,
I think we're stuck with this right now, one way or the other.
Madam Chair, I just make a general comment that over 10 months, the work group considered many different proposals. And as I mentioned before, one thing we could have done was come up with a number for a cap. And that, if you made it low enough, would certainly change the market and change things, quote unquote. There was not the appetite for what our charter was to find consensus, which was 7 of 9, which we got, to set that number at any number, whether it was high or very low. And once again, I'll restate that I stand behind the work that we did and trying to find consensus and come up with a package that we thought that would not only pass our group, but that we thought would have a good shot of passing special town meeting.
I don't disagree with all. I mean, you did a lot of work, you did spent a lot of time, but I'm still back to my opinion that we haven't really changed much of anything for all your excellent hard work.
I would beg to differ. What has changed is there's a regulatory framework that didn't, if this passes, that did not exist, and the ability to regulate short-term rentals as a community going forward. That is a massive change from where we are today. Whether it changes the number of short-term rentals the day after it passes, maybe not, but the ability to do so would be codified and built into our regulatory framework. And so that is a huge change from town meeting after town meeting of competing citizen warrant articles, none of which passed. And this process came out of the last attempt for that to happen. And so.
Well, Madam Chair, I'll agree with that. Yes, we now have regulations, so we didn't have regulations before. But again, I'm not sure how we're going to enforce those regulations. We don't even have data to have any understanding of what the true numbers are. The registry is, where's the registry? It's not here. It hasn't worked out. And yes, we have a regulations. Now we have regulations. But the actual way, the actual potential numbers of short-term rentals are not going to change significantly in my view.
Anybody want to propose any action or further discussion, items for discussion? Will we continue this in 2 weeks?
Yeah, I will
Okay.
continue it. I think we're not going anywhere here, Madam Chair. We're wasting our time.
Okay, thank you. Dave, did you want to?
Yeah, I just, Dave Iverson, Planning Board member, Affordable Housing Trust, former short-term work group member. I guess I'm speaking for myself and not any of those groups. And through you, Madam Chair, I hear Matt's fear of taking away people's rights and litigation, but I would ask John Giorgio if that's any different under an accessory use. I just feel that using zoning to regulate this is going to put us in even more ambiguity as far as true pre-existing non-conforming issues that can't be changed like they are done through a bylaw. So I don't know if John could help give some clarity to us on what it would look like if we did try to regulate through accessory use, even though some people say there wouldn't be grandfathering. I think that that's not clear. So I think it might be helpful for the board if John could help everyone understand what that would look like. Thank you.
John, you need to unmute.
There we go. I'm sorry. I had to sign off and sign on again. So the answer to that question is it depends. Okay. If you're simply going to change the use designation instead of Y, it'll be an A. The ability to use your property as a short-term rental as an accessory use will still be subject to all of the regulations that you leave in the general bylaw. What the issue will be, and Judy pinpointed this, is it's accessory to what? You know, accessory use is typically something that is incidental to the primary use. Now, Matt's suggestion has been, or what he's thinking about, is putting some more definition around the term accessory use. And I'm not quite clear because for existing rentals under the general bylaw, you can have 9 changes in occupancy in July and August. If you purchase a house after the effective date of the bylaw, that goes down to 4 changes in occupancy, with a sunrise provision after 5 years, bringing it back to 9. So I would want to see exactly how the proposal to amend Article 1 would look like. Would it be anyone who, would an accessory use be limited to 4 changes in occupancy? Or would it be limited to 9 changes in occupancy? Or would it be limited to a total number of days that you could rent in a calendar year? Any of those, I think, would be possible to put a further definition on accessory use within the zoning bylaw. But I don't know what the effect of that would be. I don't know if I'm making myself clear, but we would, it would have, I mean, I think there's a proposal to talk about, which is changing the Y to A, and then further defining what accessory use means for purposes of short-term rentals. And Matt, can you help on that? What is your thought?
My thought is to do that and to follow the work group recommendation, which is 4. Four is the number they're using for the new people. And I
So
think that they've defined it, in my mind, they've defined it without defining it.
So if I'm an existing owner, the accessory use would allow me 9 changes in ownership. If I purchase a house after the effective date of the bylaw, is my accessory use limited to 4 changes in occupancy?
I would say yes, that's what's being proposed now. Yes.
May I ask a follow-up, John? If that is, the definition sits in zoning instead of the general bylaw, then any attempt to reduce it in the future would grandfather everybody, the property with 9 contracts. The property would always have 9 contracts. It would always have 4. We would never have a property that short-term rented would never drop off, even if the community decided to further restrict in the future.
I would say that's correct, Brooke.
Okay, so that to me is a greater risk than what we're talking about here, personally. But thank you, John. Matt, did you want to?
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, can I ask a question to Malcolm about his question around measurement, what can and can't be measured? So you set up a question around the policy not changing anything, and I think what I'd push you to ask is which parts of the levers might change which, because any particular part of the package will push things in one direction or another. The final place that it rests at steady state, or in 1 year, in 3 years, or 5 years, is hard to know with market forces and dynamics and all these variables. But what is the impact on 9 versus 8 versus 7, or the different timing of a sunrise? Those are all things that individually you can look at and ask, well, if I want this outcome, or I want to change the package to have a policy one direction or another on the rental market, I think you can ask, how would each of those impact it if we change it? And I think that's an important differentiation between measuring what will happen as a final measurement versus what will it change versus how does each component impact the changes in the island. And those are importantly different and things that you could ask about in more detail.
Thanks, Matt. Kathy?
Hi, I just have a question, actually, not here to, my name is Kathy Baird. I'm short-term rental work group, only I'm speaking for myself. This is just a question. Since we finished the short-term rental work at the end of June, and then we were done, we handed it over. The last inputs we had to town council was in a meeting, and then he put together what you see up there. And we have never really had a chance to go back and proofread it to make sure it's correct. And I think there are a couple typos and things in there. So is there a vehicle for sending some references to the wrong paragraph kind of thing that we noticed in there to town council so that they can be corrected? What would be the process for that?
That would be to town manager. Send your suggested edits or corrections to the town manager.
Okay.
She'll discuss it with town
Thank
council. Yeah, thanks, Kathy. John?
Madam Chair, would it be helpful?
Please identify yourself for the record.
John Kitchener, former member of the short-term rental work group. I'm just wondering, as you guys think about the next 2 weeks or next 1 week, would it be helpful for me just to perhaps help answer Malcolm's question about, well, nothing changes? Because we think it does. Can I take 5 minutes to say what and why?
If you can keep it
I can.
brief, that'd be great.
No,
Thank
because
you.
Malcolm, we're going to stop any more commercial rentals taking place right after this article gets finalized, passed. That's a big change. No more commercial rental. All of the communities we talked to, Sedona, Honolulu, and so forth, they all said, we would say, well, we only have about 5% of our STRs currently are commercial. And
John, if I may interrupt, you mean corporate ownership,
I mean,
correct?
corporate ownership.
Thank you,
Corporate-
just for
corporate
clarification.
ownership. Every one of them said, yes, you're fortunate. You can stop what happened here, which was a incredible increase over a very short period of time. We are going to close that barn door before it happens. So I think that is a huge, huge change. Right now, anyone on the island, whether year-round or seasonal residents, can own as many STRs as they want and register them. Now, one and only one. Yes, we'll grandfather the ones that people have, but going forward, no one can register more than one. That's a huge change. If you ask me, well, how many then does that save? I don't know, Malcolm. I don't know, but I do know the difference between a free-for-all of having as many as you want versus one is significant. You know, the maximum contracts for new STR owners, this is primarily about disincentivizing people that are just coming to this island to make a fast buck by buying a home and just renting it out. I don't know how by limiting to 4 contracts, I don't know how many people that is gonna stop doing it, but it's gonna stop some. And I don't know exactly, but my feeling, and I'm like Matt, I go with my gut sometimes. My gut feeling is that many of the individuals or legal entities that are buying STRs for just that reason, they are buying what, you know, at the lower end of our market, which when we say 2 or 3 million sounds ridiculous to say that's a low end, but you know, that's the world we live in. And that is the segment that people that are buying these just to STR, that is where they're going. So everyone that we disincentivize means an on-island family may get to put a roof over their family's head. And for me, when I applied to go on the work group, that was my number one priority, to make sure we start looking after those local people that none of us can do without, whether we're seasonal residents or year-round. So, you know, it's a big change. You know, it's a door that's getting slammed. How many people it keeps out, I don't know. But, you know, when you know, and I'll stop there, Madam Chair, but these are all, I can't quantify them, but I know if we did them all, it's going to have the right kind of effect. And if we can work with Mr. Fee here to somehow refine these a little bit, I wish we would do that rather than start talking about, you know, competitive articles. Thank you so much.
Thanks, John.
Curtis Barnes. I raised this question at the Board of Health, and I want to call to your attention. John has used the term change in occupancy as part of the proposed article. I raised the question whether you're talking about 9 rentals or 9 changes in occupancy, because my family comes and uses my cottage 2 weeks, 2 individual weeks during the summer. So if you count my family as a change in occupancy as a part of the limit, that puts me at the max. But normally I would get, say, 7 rentals. So I want to be sure we look at the difference between rental contracts or changes in occupancy, and we're sure what we're talking about.
Thank you for
Thank
that
you.
question. Yeah. And if I might ask, Mr. Giorgio, is that definition then put as a policy, or it's an interesting question.
Well,
Is it
Madam,
further defined?
change in occupancy is a term that is used in the short-term rental law. And it essentially means, new rental contracts, because short-term rentals are governed by a rental contract. And so if I sign a rental contract for 2 weeks, at the end of 2 weeks, there is going to be a change in occupancy because a new individual or group of people are going to come in and rent that short-term rental, let's say for another week. So that's what change in occupancy refers to. And as I said, it is taken from the short-term rental law because that's how it's defined there.
So I think if I'm understanding the question, personal use, uncompensated use by family is not even considered a part of this. Yeah.
No, that's what I was gonna say. It's hosted and it's family and it's hosted. It doesn't count. Yeah.
So
that's
that answers that question. And I think I'm gonna wrap this up unless there's anyone else in the room who'd like to speak, and we'll continue this in 2 weeks. I do want to say that I want to reiterate what Libby said, this idea of having town council available once the articles are finalized for people to inquire on how they will impact their personal situations, and having lots of opportunities for that. So people know when they go to town meeting, really what the impact would be on them of these, and as to inform their vote at town meeting as to whether they support them or not. So,
Madam Chair, one more thing, when they are printed, they should also be printed in other languages.
on that note, I will say that we are using this special town meeting. I've talked to town administration about this as an experiment for producing these documents in multiple languages for the first time for town meeting, and using the fact that it's a short warrant and a special town meeting. And hopefully that will become policy going forward. And we'll learn from this experience with a relatively small warrant, but 100% agree. And that's on the docket to happen. So.
I had one other question, but I'll wait for next week.
Okay. And I do have a member of the public online, Karen Zagaiko, who was also a former member of the work group.
Hi, Karen Zagaiko, former member of the short-term rental work group. I just wanted to say that we have, as part of what we've worked on, we have come up with a bunch of different scenarios that could serve the basis of frequently asked questions about, if you're in this situation, this is how we think these bylaws would affect you. And so I don't know the best way to get that to you, or if that's for later down the road, but we have started on trying to think those scenarios through.
Thank you. The town manager's whispering in my ear to please forward them to her.
Okay.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And appreciate that you guys thought of that. Okay. I think that we will close this part of the agenda and go, and if Dawn hasn't fallen asleep back there, I'll turn the chair back over to her.
I guess we will move on to select board reports and comments for committee reports. And I just wanted to mention that we had before this meeting a 3-hour governance workshop today as a board. It was all recorded and it was open to the public, but no one attended. It was actually, was it 4 hours? The next one's 4 hours. And it was a really great discussion about how we govern and how we work together with town management and the things that I'm facing, the challenges facing our community with the ability to govern properly and kind of handle everything that's coming at us. And I just thought it was really valuable. We're moving from that into an update to our strategic plan at the end of October, which we'll be having a 4-hour session on that. And I do think that a lot of good discussion and good ideas came out of it. And I feel like I do have 2 small action items as chair to look into us having 1 additional meeting a month to specifically handle things like national grid petitions and licensing things. So it's not as taken up at these meetings. Be those things that are a little bit more transactional. As well as now I'm losing the other thing because I almost felt just kidding.
So if I may
Yes.
follow on to that, one of the things we talked about is the process of agenda setting and how other board members who are not the chair and vice chair can bring items. And an example of that, I'm going to start right now, is one of the areas of interest that I'm curious about is if we should do something about e-bikes and what we should do about e-bikes and how it intersects with state regulation and the impact of what's happened at the State House and how that impacts us. Because a lot of times we think we can do something and we can't because we are part of a Commonwealth. And so those discussions are starting to happen at BPAC, and I'm making some inquiries to the Mass Municipal Association myself. And so it is in this time or the earlier time in the agenda that we can sort of propose things to one another and head nod and say, yeah, this is worth moving forward or starting to look into.
That was my other action item, is to change this committee reports agenda item to be worded slightly more broadly, where we can bring up topics for future meetings that are important to individual board members.
I mean, traditionally, it's been you talk to the chair and it goes on. You know, it's sort of been, but this will make it a little more of a process, which is good.
Well, I think it's valuable too, because my speaking with the chair is 2. And if the three other members don't support us expending energy on that, having the opportunity to sort of do it in this space is helpful too. So
Yeah, but being able to do it in here and talk about it a little bit, because otherwise you just, the people feel locked out and
Yep.
that's not the goal.
that is not the goal.
I don't, things happen for, sort of when you ignore things, they come back and they happen for a reason. I truly believe that, you know, and I tell that to my kids, if you kind of ignore it, it's just going to come back worse. And I felt like it wasn't a coincidence today or yesterday when we're looking at Courtney and Jason Bridges and we're looking at the Mitchell family, Allison, Sean leaving. I think that's, sort of a blinking light for what we're facing. There's, 4 people who contributed immensely to this community. I didn't always agree with everything, but I think you can't disagree with the effort and the work all of them have put in. And that is what we're, I don't know the answer. I do know the answer with housing and things we're working on, but it makes me want to, do it more quickly even. I mean, it makes me want to focus on it even more because I think, in some of the reasons that they're giving about, we're worried about having teachers and we're worried about, whatever. I think that that's a valid, you get to that age with a family, those are valid concerns. And I think, we're trying to do some good things. We're trying to, get wording for being able to house people. We're trying to work on those types of things. But I think it's just, that was a huge reminder to me. And, and they will be missed.
Madam Chair, just to piggyback on Matt's comments Matt pointed out 4 people who have served this town ably. And there's been lots of stuff in the paper recently or in the news that have been that has been interesting, but I was reflecting a little bit on John McLaughlin's 50 years of service to the town and his service to this country in World War II. And that's an example for all of us to follow.
But are we gonna have any of us around to do that anymore? You know, that's sort of the sad, that's what I'm sort of sad. It's gonna be hard for someone to stay here for that period anymore, or want to. Like, I'm sort of the old dog here now, but, anyway.
I was just to acknowledge John McLaughlin's passing and honor all the years of service that he brought to the community.
I remember when he was Johnny Sunbeam and delivered every day to the restaurant.
Yeah, we actually should have done that at the beginning. I was remiss in putting that on. John was a planning board member when I worked there, and he used to bring me little gifts to put on my desk from the Nantucket Mall all the time. And then we served together in HDC for many years, I guess, well, the whole time I served. Any other things to report on tonight or comments? Motion
Move
to
to
adjourn.
adjourn.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Carries unanimously.